So Nick's kindly agreed to show us how to set the pole feeder up. So away you go, Nick. I'll leave it with you.
Okay, well, before we just get on to the setup, I'd just like to explain what a pole feeder is. Why is a pole feeder designed like it is? And of course, it's obvious that unlike any other feeder really, it sits straight up. And that's so it's in the right plane, basically, to be lifted and dropped in. Because you can imagine, if you had a side-loaded feeder like that, and I drop that down with a pole, you know, it's all very messy. That feeder then drops down on its side because of the lead loading on the side. And if I got a bite, then I have to pick it up, literally pick it up before I can hook the fish. You know, and it all feels wrong. It all feels wrong. So consequently, having the feeder already in the right plane, it just makes it much more effective. And you can see the leads are shaped, so there's a wide bit at the bottom, and that will just make sure that that feeder sits upright, even in a bit of flow. We're obviously holding the rig steady as well, but we're not in that we've got to pull the feeder up. It's already in the right plane to be dropped, especially when there's food in it. Drop down, picked up.
Yep.
There's no horrible lumping and bumping. If we get a bite, we're straight into the fish.
Not against the feeder.
And that, as I've already explained in one other video, the main thing about pole feeder fishing is keeping it simple so that we can hook the maximum amount of bites. Everyone who starts pole feeder fishing, before they've practiced it, will encounter missed bites. I did. Started to tear my hair out. Luckily, it's still grown back. Some people, Martin,
yeah. He wasn't very good at pole feeder fishing.
Well, his hair didn't grow back. You know. Anyway, seriously, it is. It can be frustrating. So anything you can do to make the hit bite ratio better is good, and that is certainly one thing that will make it much better, dramatically better, to have the right design of feeder. Again, we try and keep the rigs as simple as possible, and as I already said, the simplest way is just to fish short and drop it in with a whip, hopefully an elasticated whip.
Yeah.
But there are some times where you want to ship out, and again, we want to get a rig capable of absorbing the fish from feeling the end of the pole. So we're using these Bitemaster indicators, which are just a length of basically soft pole elastic with a peg at one end and a loop at the other, like this. And what we do when we come to put it onto our pole is, so this is the internal elastic that's in the end of my pole.
And what strength elastic do you like to use?
Just got to put my glasses on. This is a number 10, and that's what I would generally use, because I'm not really fishing for carp with these. I'm fishing a river for roach, but also in the conditions, probably it's got a bit of water in, a bit of flood water. There's bound to be some hybrids, some bream that knock around in them conditions. Big perch, bigger roach than you would normally catch on a normal river sometimes. So we need a little bit of elastic to play them with. So even when I'm shipping, when I'm just dropping my whip rig in to hand, I normally incorporate a bit of elastic outside the soft donkey top,
right? Yeah.
Through some eyes, and that is the reason when I try and ship that out, it's a tangle every time around those eyes.
So you literally want to just go with that.
That's
method.
right.
Yeah.
And that is that if you can get away with it, that is the best way to do it, because it keeps it simple. But when we do ship out to, let's say, 10 meters, I revert back to my normal internal elastic, and it's normally a 10.
Yeah.
Normally a 10 for playing bigger fish.
Yep.
So once I've got this little rig here, which I've already rigged up. So this is my main line to the feeder, and I'll explain this end in a minute, but that's my main line which goes straight to the feeder. Okay, now on the main line I have put on a little bit of silicone. Let me just show you, draw that off. Just a little bit of silicone, and this silicone comes with the Bitemaster indicator, so that's a sort of bit of 1mm silicone, right? And that goes on to my main line, and then the main line has a loop which is going to go on to the Stomfo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the Stomfo from my pole, so that main line will just go over the Stomfo like that. Then the other end of the Bitemaster indicator has also got a little loop on, so that goes onto the Stomfo as well. It just came off, so let's just put that back on. So you've got the loop of your Bitemaster indicator and the rig loop on the Stomfo together, which might sound a little bit unusual if you've never done it before. So there they are, hanging off the end of your pole. Now you've already threaded that bit of silicone on your main line. Okay, so I'm now going to push the peg of the Bitemaster indicator into that. Okay, like so. So now what I've got is the elastic indicator and the main line hanging together off the end of your pole. Now what I will do is just pull enough line back through that rubber. So ideally you've got about 1.5 times the length of elastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, that looks slightly unusual, but like when you're fishing at 10 meters, you don't really even notice this looper line.
No.
But that's the important bit, because that looper line allows that elastic to stretch until the looper line straightens.
Yeah.
Once it's straightened, and so in that scenario, you've hooked a fish.
Yes.
You've hooked a fish. That little collar will have been sitting on the surface of the water while you're waiting for a bite. And once that fish comes along, gives you a bite, that will just disappear under the water like normal tip of a float would.
Yeah.
You know, so you respond, you're striking, you're hooking the fish, and then once that line is straightened like that, that elastic can't stretch anymore, so it can never break.
No.
And then you're playing, if it's a big fish, you're playing the big fish on your number 10 elastic.
Yeah.
And
So
if
the main line's supporting this bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
the main line is straight now. The yellow elastic can't stretch anymore, and you're playing it on your number 10 or whatever you've got in your pole. And certainly that scenario, even if I was fishing close in, but I was expecting to encounter more than one big fish, if I was thinking, oh, this could be a bream day, I would use this setup. Just even with the elasticated whip, you've only got a short bit of elastic, and it can be a little bit, it can be a little bit hairy.
Yeah, definitely.
So if I was expecting bream, I would use this rig. So that's how we use the Bitemaster, and it's all about, primarily, you've got to get the bite first, let alone play the fish. You've got to get the bite, and the stretch of that elastic is basically allowing the fish to take the bait and have the confidence to swim off with it without feeling how stiff that pole is. And if you didn't incorporate this and you just had a straight line, I guarantee you that you would get some savage bites, feel them, and you just couldn't hook them.
No.
I'm not saying you wouldn't hook the odd bream, the odd slow biting bream, but big crafty roach, they feel it.
Yeah.
And you would miss bite after bite. I know this because, as I say, luckily my hair grew back. Okay, so that is the main reason you're trying to convert a bite into a hooked fish.
hooked fish,
And then once you hook the fish, you're playing it.
Yeah.
You're playing it properly. Okay, so that explains this end. Obviously, because of that scenario, we're trying to soften the effect of a stiff pole.
Yep.
We want to get away with as light an elastic as we can here. Now, this is the heavy one I've rigged up, just so that you can see it. People who are watching this video can see it quite clearly. That's the heaviest version, and that is equal to a number 6 elastic, solid.
Yep.
Personally, I don't use this version because my rivers, even the Yare, doesn't command an elastic of that strength.
No.
I can normally get away with the very lightest one, which is the green number 2
really?
elastic. Now, if you can imagine a flooded river and all that comes down with it, debris and what have you, as long as there's not too much debris, believe it or not, with only about, let's say the swim is 10 foot deep, even with all that flow, a number 2 elastic will stay perfect. And you imagine how easy it is for a fish to stretch a number 2 elastic. They don't even feel it.
No, I suppose they would.
All right, so you can convert virtually every bite you get into a hooked fish because you've only got a number 2 elastic there. The only time I have to go up to the medium, which is a blue number 4 elastic, is when the debris builds up on my line a little bit and it starts to stretch the number 2 elastic out. You can imagine you get a little bit of a build up of force on your line. And if you haven't had a bite quickly, you can find that number 2 elastic starts to stretch out to the point where
it's defeating the object.
it's not doing anything.
Yeah.
So that's when I just take this off, unpeg it, slip my number 4 on, and I'm fishing again.
Because that's the beauty of it. You can change it mid-fish.
You can change it over straight
Yeah.
away. Everything is interchangeable.
Yeah.
And for me, my scenario of my rivers is that I only use the light or the medium, and usually the light. This one would come useful for rivers like the River Wye
Trent.
and the Trent that are spate rivers, and they're really rocking through. You might need to use the heavy one.
Yeah.
I've never actually had to personally, and I've been fishing this method for donkey's years. All right, so that just explains why we have basically a light, medium, and a heavy version. Okay, 3 choices. So that explains the top end. The bottom end, again, I like to keep it really simple. So all the feeders come with a loop and a swivel like that. So all I've done, I've attached my main line to that swivel just at the bottom of my main line, so that's there. So what I've done, let's just get rid of that bit over there. So what I've done, I've tied a loop of about 1 inch, which I've attached to the swivel, and then instead of chopping the spare end up, I've tied another knot which is only about 6 millimeters above it. So I've got a knot and a knot. That's all part of that loop. So I've got in there's a little double piece of line. Now I use that for all my paternoster rigs.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. So let's just slip down over it. When I come to add my hook length, can you see I left that fairly slack, the loop. So this is the loop on my hook length here coming off as my paternoster, and I've just literally lassoed that. So basically my hook length has got a loop in the end of it as normal. Yes. So I've just rested that, and I've put the hook through its own loop and then pulled it tight, so it's lassoed between those 2 knots.
Oh, I like that.
Can you see that?
Yeah,
so,
I do.
So that is, and that forms a little stiff boom. I might even make that loop on my hook length a little bit longer, so it forms a little bit of a stiff boom. But that is a pretty fail-safe way of making a good paternoster, and it's resting on that double little piece of line as well.
Yeah.
Now, for fisheries that don't allow a fixed feeder as such, or they want you know, a safe rig. A lot of people will run their feeder on the main line and then have either a little bead with a quick change thing on it or a swivel, and we'll have the hook length off that. So in theory, if you do break off above, then the fish can swim off without the feeder. All well and good, but to my mind, the fish has still got a hook length with a bead or a swivel on it, which isn't ideal.
No.
Now, I know a fish can get rid of it probably eventually, but there's nothing to say that bead doesn't hang up on a branch or something like that. So to my mind, it's not wholly fish friendly.
No.
Now, what I do, instead of tying the second knot, I'll tie that loop that goes onto the swivel of the feeder, but I'll then break that off and just have one knot. But I still lasso my hook length above that knot, so it's actually on the main line. So then if I do break off, that main line will just pull out through that loop, and all the fish has got is the hook length, but there's nothing on the end of it.
Well, that's much more fish friendly.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. There's nothing that much there for a fish to snag up on, and hopefully the fish can get rid of the hook in due course anyway. All right, but there's nothing to drag. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's right. Nothing to get caught up on.
So on a fishery that, you know, insists on safe rigs, I don't tie that second knot. It just, of course, there's nothing to stop the hook length from going right up.
No.
But in practice, that doesn't really happen. No. You know, you can sort of pinch it down so it grips it. A little bit, but that's a more fish friendly rig to my mind.
I think you're right.
Than having a bead. Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how I tie all my paternoster rigs. So
you caught one already.
Caught one already. So that's just my simple hook length. If I just lay it on the table like that, you can see I've got I've tied this one quite short. But to be honest, in practice, I wouldn't have much longer hook length than that. I don't ever really go for a long hook length, because my theory is that if a pole feeder's going to work, it's them days that a fish are sort of likely to come up to it anyway. The river's generally coloured, maybe in flood. The fish are going to come near the feeder, so I want my hook bait pretty close. The only thing, because you're holding the rig, dropping it down, and you're holding it sort of like fairly vertical, maybe a slight angle, but you're holding it fairly vertical, so your hook length starts quite a way off the bottom. And this is why I only have a very short paternoster. You know, you could virtually get away with hardly anything, but I have only an inch really where my hook length comes off. And I think in a fast flow, you need to shot that hook length.
I can see what the shot's for now.
To keep that hook length down. Because without the shot, I think with a fast enough turbulent flow, it could make the hook bait rise. And in practice, I'm sure it does, because again, without a shot, you're back to the missed bite scenario a lot of the time. And I just know this through experience. So I always use usually a fairly big shot. That's a number 4. I've even used a BB when it's even an AA actually, when it's really been, there's lots of rubbish. And it's been turbulent. And the other added benefit of having a shot there about sort of 3 or 4 inches above the hook is, if there is any rubbish coming down, oftentimes the rubbish will collect on that shot rather than on your hook bait.
So it gives you a chance to have a clean hook bait and longer.
It does. But the main reason is that it just pins it down. Now, I have seen some anglers, Bob Nudd would be one of them, who's used this rig, but he's had 3-4 little number 8s. You could do that. Personally, I think it's just you can be too clever for your clogs in a way. You know what I mean? I don't think personally you need to separate that out. I've always done just well enough with one big shot.
Is it more things to tangle as well?
I think so,
Yeah.
and I just don't think you need, but it's something you could try
Yeah.
if you're of that mind. But generally, I find just one shot. It can be a number 6 on a sort of fairly calm river, up to say a BB on a heavier flow. And it's simple. There's not much can go wrong with that.
No.
And I'd just be dropping that rig in slightly down my peg, and just feeling the feeder to touch the bottom, and hold the whole thing up. So basically, it's that scenario where you're dropping the feeder down slightly downstream. You can, if you're fishing long pole, you can put it on a bump bar, hold it really steady. You've plumbed up. You can use the feeder, or you can just unclip that and put a plummet on or something, just to get the depth. And you want the depth to be so that when you drop it in and then just lay the pole back, this is why there's a slight angle. You drop the pole down, pole feeder down, and then just angle it back and drop the pole on your bump bar, so that you get that slight angle like that, and that little indicator will come down onto the surface of the river, and you're just waiting for that lovely feeling of a bite, and then your hook length is down here.
Brilliant.
You can see it's an
Yeah,
effective
it's
method.
brilliant. Yeah, I've never seen this. I've never seen it done like that. Anything,
Yeah.
like you say about your paternoster,
Yeah.
I've never seen it done like that. I can see why that would work.
Yeah,
And it definitely throws that bit away, doesn't it?
it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll use
I like it.
even when I'm fishing a
Yeah.
rod and reel, and I want, like on a still water, and I want a paternoster type presentation. I use that.
Really?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's so tangle free.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's lots of different ways to make a paternoster, but that's the most tangle free, I find.
Yeah.
And like I say, you can incorporate that safety aspect. Maybe we should do that anyway, but some fisheries do say, we want a tank, we want a safe rig, and I think that's the safest as they get, really.
I certainly do too. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
lovely and
that's
neat,
basically pole feeder rig.
lovely and effective.
Yeah,
Well, I've learned something, and hope you all have as well. Thank you, Nick. Brilliant.
no problem.
Cheers.